Look at a map of the world. On one side, Europe, a patchwork of nations, languages, and borders. On the other, China, a vast, unified civilization that has endured for millennia. Why this fundamental difference? The answer begins not with emperors or philosophers, but with the very ground beneath their feet. China's geography created what historians call a natural fortress. To the west, the towering Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau formed an almost impassable barrier. To the north, the Gobi Desert and Mongolian steppes. To the southwest, dense jungles and mountains. These natural walls protected a fertile core. Now look at Europe. The Alps cut through the center, the Pyrenees separate France from Spain, the Carpathians divide Eastern Europe. Instead of one protected core, Europe has multiple isolated valleys and plains, each developing its own identity and power base. The Yellow River Basin became China's cradle of civilization. This fertile, less soil region could support dense agricultural populations. When you have abundant food in a concentrated area, you can build large armies and complex bureaucracies, the foundations of empire. Europe's rivers tell a different story. The Danube flows east, the Rhine north, the Rhone south. They don't converge into a single agricultural heartland, but instead create separate economic zones. This meant power remained decentralized, with multiple centers competing for resources. China's North China Plain is vast, over 400,000 square kilometers of relatively flat, fertile land. This allowed agricultural techniques and political control to spread easily. Once a dynasty controlled this plain, it had the resources to expand outward. Contrast this with Europe's Great European Plain. Yes, it's large, but it's interrupted by rivers, forests, and has no natural eastern boundary. Invaders could sweep across it endlessly, which is exactly what happened with Huns, Mongols, and various Germanic tribes. China's coastline is relatively smooth, with few deep natural harbors in the north. This meant maritime trade developed later, keeping power centered inland. Europe's coastline is deeply indented with countless harbors, encouraging separate maritime powers to develop. The Qin dynasty's unification in 221 BCE was geographically inevitable. They controlled the Wei River Valley, a strategic position that gave them access to the North China Plain. Once they conquered that plain, the rest followed naturally. Rome tried to unify Europe, but geography worked against them. The Alps divided Italy from the north, the Mediterranean islands were separate entities, and the vast eastern plains were indefensible. Their empire was always an artificial construct over geographic reality. China's Grand Canal, completed during the Sui dynasty, connected the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. This created an economic and transportation network binding north and south together. Europe has no equivalent. Its rivers don't connect in ways that facilitate unification. The Silk Road passed through China's western corridors, like the Hexi Corridor, narrow, defensible passages that could be controlled. European trade routes had to cross multiple mountain passes and river crossings, each controlled by different powers taking their cut. When nomadic invaders threatened China, they had to breach specific passes like Shanhai Pass or Jiayu Pass. These became legendary battlegrounds. In Europe, invaders could choose from dozens of invasion routes across the northern plains. China's river systems facilitated cultural homogenization. The Yellow River and Yangtze both flow east-west, allowing agricultural techniques, writing systems, and administrative practices to spread along similar latitudes. Europe's rivers flow in all directions, carrying different cultures to different destinations. The Tibetan Plateau isn't just a barrier, it's a massive rain shadow. It blocks moisture from the Indian Ocean, creating the arid conditions of Western China. This limited agricultural expansion westward, keeping civilization focused on the eastern river valleys. Europe has no equivalent rain shadow on this scale. Moisture from the Atlantic penetrates deep inland, creating agricultural potential almost everywhere. This meant many regions could become self-sufficient power bases, reducing the need for central control. China's heartland is protected but not isolated. The Silk Road provided controlled contact with the outside world. Europe, surrounded by seas and with multiple land approaches, was constantly receiving new peoples, ideas, and technologies, but also new divisions. The concept of all under heaven, Tianxia, emerged from this geographic reality. When your civilization exists in a clearly defined geographic basin, it's natural to think of it as the entire civilized world. Europe's fragmented landscape fostered competing worldviews. Look at China's southern expansion. The mountain ranges run east-west, creating natural corridors for expansion. As Chinese civilization moved south, it followed these geographic pathways. European expansion had no such clear geographic guidance. The Great Wall follows geographic logic. It was built along the natural boundary between agricultural China and the steppe nomads. In Europe, no single natural boundary separated civilized from barbarian lands, so no single defensive line could be built. China's periodic reunifications, after periods of division, like after the Three Kingdoms or Five Dynasties periods, were geographically predetermined. Whoever controlled the North China Plain and river systems would eventually reunify the country. Charlemagne tried to create a European empire, but his successors divided it along geographic lines. The mountains and rivers created natural division points. The Treaty of Verdun in 843 CE literally carved Europe along geographic boundaries. China's capital cities moved, but always within the geographic core: Xi'an, Luoyang, Kaifeng, Beijing. All control access to the North China Plain. European capitals developed in isolated valleys or on defensible sites, each controlling its own region. The monsoon climate affects all of East Asia, creating agricultural synchronization. When the rains came, they came to the entire region. Europe's more varied climate meant different regions had different agricultural cycles, reducing economic interdependence. China's less soil is incredibly fertile, but also erodes easily, causing the Yellow River to flood unpredictably. Controlling these floods required massive, centralized water management projects, which in turn required centralized political power. Europe's rivers are more stable, with less catastrophic flooding. Water management could be handled locally. This meant European political units could remain smaller. They didn't need empire-scale organization to survive. The Mongolian invasions tested both civilizations. In China, the Mongols conquered the entire geographic basin and established the Yuan dynasty. In Europe, they reached the edge of the plains at Vienna and stopped. The fragmented geography beyond was too difficult to conquer. China's written language spread across the entire geographic basin because it could be understood despite regional pronunciation differences. Europe's languages diverged along geographic lines. Mountains and rivers became language boundaries. The Forbidden City in Beijing sits at the northern apex of the North China Plain, controlling access from the north. Versailles in France is in a river valley controlling access to Paris. Different geographic positions reflect different strategic realities. When European colonialism began, Portugal, Spain, England, and France could all develop separately because their geographic isolation allowed independent maritime development. China had only one coastline facing the Pacific, limiting separate maritime power centers. The Opium Wars forced China to engage with European powers on their maritime terms. Suddenly, China's geographic advantages became disadvantages. Their smooth coastline offered few defensible positions against European naval power. Today, China's high-speed rail network follows ancient geographic pathways, connecting the same regions that have been connected for millennia. Europe's rail network has to navigate the continent's fragmented geography, reflecting its political divisions. The European Union, represents an attempt to overcome geographic division through political and economic means. But notice how its expansion has followed geographic patterns, first the core Western European plain, then incorporating regions separated by mountains and seas. China's Belt and Road Initiative seeks to recreate the Silk Road connections, controlled corridors through geographic barriers. It's a modern manifestation of an ancient geographic reality. China connects to the world through specific, controllable passages. So was China's unification inevitable? Given its geography, a protected fertile core with clear boundaries, yes. Could Europe have unified under different circumstances? Given its fragmented landscape with multiple defensible regions, probably not. Geography isn't destiny, human agency matters, but it sets the stage. China's emperors worked with geographic advantages to build unity. Europe's kings worked against geographic divisions to maintain their separate domains. The land shaped the people as much as the people shaped the land. Next time you look at a world map, remember, those political boundaries didn't appear randomly. They grew from the mountains, rivers, and plains beneath them. In China, geography created unity. In Europe, geography created diversity. Both have their strengths and their costs.